sir. The night air cut through Marissa Leone's thin coat like a knife. Snow fell in ragged flakes, sticking to her hair and eyelashes, and the streets of Brooklyn were nearly empty except for the occasional hum of a distant car. Her breath came in visible puffs, each one sharp and fleeting, vanishing into the cold. She had left work late, exhausted, thinking the walk home would be a routine chore. But that was before she saw her, a small, fragile figure huddled on the curb, shivering violently in the dark. Marissa's heart skipped. Something about the child's posture, the way she hugged herself tightly as if trying to compress her body into warmth, stopped Marissa in her tracks. It wasn't just the cold that made her uneasy. There was an intensity in the girl's gaze, a flicker of fear and calculation that no 10-year-old should carry. "Hey," Marissa called softly, but with enough firmness to cut through the wind. The girl flinched, raising her small, pale face toward her. Marissa caught her breath. The dark hair plastered to the girl's forehead. The fine coat that was far too thin for this weather. She knew her. Francesca Vitale. Francesca, daughter of Salvatore Vitale. The Dawn of New York, the man whose name alone made people shiver and whisper, whose empire of power extended into every corner of the city. And here she was, alone, shivering in the snow. Marissa's pulse raced. She had heard stories about Salvatore, ruthless, intelligent, calculating. A man who could crush you, sir, without leaving a trace. A man who controlled people as easily as a puppeteer moved his marionettes. But seeing his daughter, helpless and vulnerable, changed everything. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was urgency. She had to act. Without thinking, she pulled off her own coat and wrapped it around Francesca's small shoulders. The girl froze, blinking up at her with wide, startled eyes, and then hugged the coat to her chest, as if it were a lifeline. "Thank you," Francesca stammered, her teeth, chattering violently. Marissa forced a reassuring smile. "You'll be okay now? Just hold on, all right?" Francesca nodded, clutching the coat tightly, but there was a tension in her small body that made Marissa's stomach knot. Something told her the danger was not over, and then, like a shadow slipping over the sidewalk, footsteps approached. Crisp, deliberate, heavy. Marissa's heart lurched as she turned. The man standing there commanded the very air around him, tall, impeccably dressed in a black overcoat. His presence exuded power. His dark eyes scanned them both with precision, sharp as a blade. He didn't speak at first, just watched, every muscle coiled, every breath deliberate. "Marissa Leone," the man said finally, his voice low and measured. "Why is my daughter in the street?" Marissa swallowed hard. Her mind raced, calculating every possible outcome. Threat? Warning? Test? IA found her cold, she stammered. She was alone. "I just wanted to help." The man's gaze never wavered. Salvatore Vitale. His reputation preceded him, but seeing him now, in the flesh, was different. He wasn't a story or a headline. He was terrifyingly real, intelligent, intimidating. And yet, for the briefest moment, Marissa saw something softer as his eyes flicked to Francesca, a flicker of concern. "You helped her," he said finally, almost more to himself than to her. His tone carried no accusation, but the weight of his power pressed down like the winter air. "Many people would have passed, sir. They would have turned their eyes. But you didn't." Marissa's chest tightened. She had never felt so exposed and so alive at the same time. She realized, in that instant, that her act of kindness had crossed into a world she didn't fully understand, a world of fear, loyalty, and consequences she couldn't predict. Salvatore studied her for a long moment. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, he turned, disappearing into the night without another word. Marissa stood frozen, heart hammering, the answer, cold suddenly unbearable. Francesca clutched her coat tighter, whispering, "Why did he go? I don't know," Marissa said softly, brushing snow from the girl's hair. "But you're safe now." They walked slowly, Francesca leaning on her arm, her small steps unsteady. Marissa's mind was a whirlwind of fear and relief. She knew the streets could be cruel, but she hadn't expected to become entangled with a man like Salvatore Vitale simply by offering warmth to a child. When they finally reached a slightly safer corner, Francesca paused. Will Will he be mad? She asked, her voice trembling. Daddy? Marissa looked at her, feeling the weight of that question. I don't think so, she said, though uncertainty gnawed at her. You were cold. You didn't do anything wrong. Francesca's eyes filled with tears, not just from the cold, but from the relief, the confusion, the complexity of emotions she barely understood. Marissa held her close, whispering reassurances as snow continued to fall. She didn't know what would happen next, but she made a silent promise to protect this child however she could. And in the shadowed distance, unobserved, Salvatore Vitale watched them both from a distance. He had expected nothing from the encounter, no emotional tug, no moral quandary, but seeing Francesca safe, wrapped in someone else's care, stirred something he hadn't felt in years. Vulnerability. A slow, deliberate thought formed in his mind. Trust was rare, loyalty rarer, and in this, moment, he realized he might have just witnessed the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. The cold wasn't just a physical sensation anymore. It was a test, a warning, a promise, and for Marissa Leone, the night had only just begun. The morning after that night, Marissa could barely eat. Every sound seemed louder, sharper, the clatter of dishes, the distant rumble of a subway, the scraping of a shovel against icy pavement. Her mind kept returning to Francesca, to the way, The little girl had clung to her coat, to the intensity in her wide eyes, and most of all, to Salvatore Vitale, the man who had appeared out of the shadows, silent, commanding, and yet somehow human, at least in his concern for his daughter. She didn't know what to do with the memory. Should she forget it, let it dissolve into the city's background hum like so many fleeting encounters? Or was she now, unwittingly, entangled in a world she didn't fully understand, a world ruled by power, loyalty, and fear? By mid-afternoon, a sharp knock on her apartment door shattered her thoughts. She froze, a cold pit forming in her stomach. The sound was deliberate, measured, not the frantic tapping of a neighbor, but the precise, controlled rhythm of someone who expected her to answer. Marissa Leone? Her heart stopped. She opened the door a crack, and there he was, Salvatore Vitale, the dawn. Her pulse surged. He wasn't smiling, but there was a calmness to his presence that was almost, unsettling. The man radiated authority without needing to raise his voice, a presence that filled the room before he even stepped inside. I want to thank you, he said simply, stepping past her into the small, tidy apartment. He didn't ask permission, he didn't need it. Marissa closed the door behind him, searching for words. I didn't do anything, I saw her, she was cold, I know. Salvatore interrupted softly, almost kindly, yet there was steel beneath the warmth. I know, most, people would have walked past. Most people wouldn't care. But you didn't. That says a lot about you. Marissa felt a strange mixture of fear and awe. The man was dangerous. Everyone said so. But here he was, standing in her living room, acknowledging her courage without so much as a hint of threat, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being tested, that this gratitude was only the beginning of a negotiation she didn't fully understand. Would you like to meet her properly? He, asked after a moment, his voice almost hesitant. Francesca is safe now, of course, but I think she would like to see you again. Marissa hesitated. The logical part of her screamed to decline. This was the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the city, a man whose enemies were everywhere. A single misstep could put her in danger, but the protective instinct she felt for Francesca overrode fear. I'd like that, she said quietly. Salvatore nodded, a faint, imperceptible motion. Tomorrow, noon, at the Vitale estate. The next day, Marissa approached the Vitale estate with trepidation. It was an enormous mansion, guarded, imposing, almost entirely removed from the world she knew. She felt like a trespasser in a place she had no right to enter. But the moment Francesca saw her, the fear and hesitation melted away. The little girl ran forward, flinging herself into Marissa's arms with a joy that was startlingly pure. "You came!" Francesca cried, her voice bright with relief. "I missed you." Marissa hugged her tightly. "I told you I would come," she said softly, brushing snow from the girl's dark hair. There was an ease to the moment that seemed almost unreal. Two people from entirely different worlds, finding connection amidst snow and fear. Salvatore watched them from the doorway. His expression was unreadable, as always, but inside, he was a storm. He prided himself on control, on knowing and predicting every outcome, on keeping his world precisely, ordered. And yet, seeing his daughter respond so openly to someone outside their world stirred feelings he hadn't felt in years. Protection, gratitude, something warmer, more human. And for the first time, he realized that control could only take him so far. There were things, emotions, acts of kindness, that he could neither command nor predict. "You saved me," Francesca whispered, holding Marissa's hand as if it were a lifeline. "I was so cold." Marissa smiled softly. "You're safe now," she, reassured her. Salvatore cleared his throat. Francesca looked up, startled. "Daddy, go on," he said quietly, almost gently. "I'll be outside." He turned and left, closing the door behind him. Marissa felt a chill of recognition. The man's presence, even in absence, was immense. He watched everything, always, and yet he had given them this small pocket of freedom, a moment where his authority didn't suffocate them. Over the next few days, Marissa found herself visiting Francesca more, frequently. Each visit revealed new layers of both girl and father. Francesca was curious, bright, and surprisingly insightful for her age. She had inherited her father's intelligence and instinct, even if not his ruthlessness. She asked questions about Marissa's life, laughed at small jokes, and occasionally clung to her hand when a shadow or noise spooked her. Salvatore, in contrast, remained a constant, silent presence in the background. He allowed the visits, yes, but he watched, studied, analyzed. His daughter's joy was tempered by his constant vigilance. He noticed every glance, every hesitation, every tiny detail of Marissa's actions. The man was powerful and intelligent, and his mind worked in ways that few could comprehend. But even he could not predict the emotional weight of these visits, the warmth Marissa brought into Francesca's life, the human connection he had been missing for so long. One evening, as Marissa prepared to leave, Salvatore approached her. His eyes were, dark, intense, yet not threatening. "You could have walked away," he said, his voice measured. "Many would have. You didn't. That is rare." Marissa nodded, unsure what to say. "I just wanted her to be safe," she replied quietly. "And yet," he said slowly, "your courage and integrity have not gone unnoticed." His gaze lingered longer than necessary, sharp as a blade, and Marissa felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the winter chill. "You have a heart that most people lack. That is, dangerous and valuable." She realized, suddenly, that she was being drawn deeper into a world she hadn't intended to enter, a world of power, influence, and danger. And yet, she couldn't turn away from Francesca. Salvatore studied her for another long moment. "I trust you," he said finally, "but trust in my world is earned, and it is tested." Marissa felt a flutter of fear and something else, anticipation maybe, or recognition that her life had irrevocably changed. She didn't fully understand, what Salvatore meant, but she knew one thing: the next chapter of their lives, all three of them, was beginning. And in that moment she realized that this wasn't just about helping a little girl in the cold. It was about navigating the fragile, dangerous, and unexpectedly human world of Salvatore Vitale, the Mafia boss, the father, the man who could destroy or protect, all depending on a single choice. For Marissa, the stakes had never been higher, and for Salvatore, the realization was, quietly forming. Sometimes the most powerful force was not fear or loyalty, but kindness. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of proximity and tension. Marissa's visits became the highlight of Francesca's days, but each meeting carried a silent undertone, the looming presence of her father, Salvatore Vitale, who always seemed to be watching without intruding. He was never overt, never threatening, but his gaze had the weight of inevitability. Marissa could feel it, like a shadow, brushing the edges of her consciousness. One evening, Marissa arrived at the estate to find Francesca sitting by the window, her face pale from worry. Snow had started falling again, the flakes heavier, wetter this time. "Something's wrong," Francesca whispered, not making eye contact. "Daddy, he's upset. I don't know why. Marissa's stomach tightened. She had come to understand the delicate balance of Salvatore's moods, how a single wrong glance, a misinterpreted word, could shift the air, around him from calm to electric tension. Let's talk inside, she said, gently taking Francesca's hand. They moved to the warmth of the drawing room, where a fire crackled softly, casting shadows across the ornate walls. Francesca's small hands fiddled with the edge of her coat. I was playing outside, and I heard voices, men talking. Daddy was angry. He said something about someone not being careful. Her voice trembled. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Marissa knelt beside her. Francesca, you're safe. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes, the people who have power, they worry more than they show. But that doesn't mean you're in danger. Francesca leaned into her, and Marissa felt a pang of protectiveness so sharp it almost took her breath away. She had never encountered such intensity in a child before, not just intelligence, but intuition, awareness far beyond her years. Francesca's life was a fragile balance, constantly teetering on the edge of control and chaos, and every misstep could ripple into disaster. Salvatore entered quietly then, his presence unmistakable even without a word. He closed the door behind him, his coat dusted with snow. He didn't sit. He didn't smile. He simply watched, his dark eyes sweeping over them like a hawk. You're worried, Marissa said. Careful. You don't have to be. Francesca is safe. Salvatore's gaze shifted to her, and for the first time his expression softened, though only slightly. You mean well, he said, almost to himself. But good intentions can complicate things. Marissa swallowed hard. She had seen his power before, felt it in the night he confronted her in the street. But this was different. He was a father, yes, but also a man whose life was built on precision, strategy, and control. And yet, here he was, letting a stranger enter that world, testing her without saying so. I just want her to be okay, Marissa said, her voice steady despite the tension curling in her chest. She's a child. She deserves warmth, safety, and someone who cares. Salvatore studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, a subtle, deliberate motion. Perhaps that is true. He turned to Francesca. Go to your room, he said softly. Francesca hesitated, glancing at Marissa, then nodded and left without protest. The room felt heavy after she left. Marissa realized she was alone with Salvatore Vitale, a man who could dominate a room with a glance, a whisper, or even silence. She felt exposed, measured as if every thought, every word, every heartbeat was being analyzed. You're brave, he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. Most people wouldn't step into my world, even to help a child. You did. That matters. Marissa shook her head. I wasn't thinking about bravery. I was thinking about her. Salvatore's eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite identify. Approval? Curiosity? Something deeper. You see the world in shades that most people ignore, he said almost, reluctantly. I admire that, but it makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability in my world can be exploited. Marissa's heart raced. The man was warning her, yes, but there was also a strange respect in his tone. He recognized her humanity, her capacity to act with empathy, even when the stakes were impossibly high, and for reasons she couldn't articulate. That recognition terrified her as much as it inspired her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the snow continued to fall, muffling the city's noise, creating a world apart, a fragile cocoon in which power, fear, and compassion coexisted uneasily. I want to trust you, Salvatore said finally. His voice was low, measured, but trust must be earned and tested. Marissa nodded, understanding that her journey had only begun. She had stepped into a world ruled by a man whose intellect and control were legendary. Every smile, every gesture, every word would be scrutinized. And yet, she knew she could not walk away, Not now, not when Francesca's trust had been placed in her hands. The weeks became a rhythm of quiet observation and small victories. Francesca thrived under Marissa's care, her laughter returning in little bursts, her curiosity undiminished by fear. Salvatore remained vigilant, yet he began to allow small freedoms. A book shared between the two women, a secret game in the garden, the way Francesca's laughter could echo through the halls without interruption. But one night, the fragile balance shattered. Marissa was walking home, her coat dusted with snow, when she noticed a black sedan parked across the street. The engine was off, the windows dark. Her heart froze. She recognized the subtle signals of surveillance, trained eyes, practiced patience, waiting for a mistake. She quickened her pace, but her instincts screamed that she was being watched, and she was right. The sedan followed her silently, shadows moving in tandem with her steps. She ducked into an alley, pressed against the cold brick wall, trying to calm her racing heart. Whoever was following her knew her routine, her habits, her movements. The realization hit her like a blow. This world wasn't just about Francesca, or even about Salvatore's approval. It was about power, control, and danger that could reach her at any moment. And yet, somewhere beneath the fear, there was resolve. She had chosen this path when she wrapped that coat around Francesca. She couldn't turn back now. When she returned to the Vitale estate, breathless and shaken, Salvatore was waiting. He didn't raise an eyebrow, didn't speak immediately. He simply watched, as if reading the terror and determination etched across her face. "You were followed," he said quietly. "Did you notice?" Marissa nodded, unable to speak. "Good," he said, his tone neutral but edged with sharp calculation. "Then you know what it means to be in my world. Danger is always present, loyalty is tested, and courage is rare." Marissa met his gaze, understanding fully for the first time the weight of his life, the balance of love and fear, of family and empire. And in that instant, she realized that her connection with Francesca had not just put her in danger, it had brought her into the heart of a man whose intelligence and power were nearly impossible to match, yet whose humanity could still be touched by a simple act of kindness. The stakes had never been higher. The morning after the surveillance incident, Marissa felt a heaviness she couldn't shake. The snow had stopped, leaving streets glistening under the pale sun, but the city felt colder somehow, sharper. Every glance over her shoulder, every passing shadow, reminded her that the world she had stepped into was not forgiving. Francesca's laughter from the previous evening haunted her memory, reminding her of what was at stake, a child's innocence, caught in a world of fear and power. When she arrived at the Vitale estate, she found Salvatore waiting in the main hall. He, wasn't pacing. He wasn't commanding. He was standing perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, the faintest crease between his brows betraying a thought deeper than anyone could see. "You noticed the car," he said without preamble. "You knew then that someone was watching you." Marissa swallowed, feeling the old fear coil in her stomach. "I did," she admitted. "I didn't know who it was. You did exactly what I hoped," he interrupted, stepping closer. "You remained calm. You didn't, panic. That is what matters. You are learning quickly." There was a pause. Marissa could feel his gaze piercing her, measuring, evaluating. Then, slowly, he said, "It wasn't random. That car, it was a message, a warning, to test loyalty, to gauge reaction, to see if Francesca's protector could withstand pressure." Marissa's pulse quickened. "So, it wasn't about me personally?" "No," he said softly, but there was a weight behind the word. "It's about survival. In my world, people are tested, constantly. Trust is earned, not freely given. You passed the first test." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Relief surged, but it was mingled with something else. Anticipation, unease, the knowledge that tests were far from over. She had felt the stakes from the very first night she wrapped her coat around Francesca, but now she understood fully. Salvatore Vitale's world was a crucible, and she had just stepped into the fire. That evening, Francesca was waiting for her in the small playroom, her dark eyes bright but edged with worry. "Marissa," she whispered, clutching a small stuffed bear. "Daddy, he's not happy, I can tell." Marissa knelt beside her. "Shh! Listen to me. You're safe. He's watching, yes, but he's not angry at you. He's careful. That's his way of protecting you." Francesca frowned. "But he's so scary sometimes. He looks at me like he knows everything I'm thinking." Marissa smiled softly. "He does know a lot, but that doesn't mean he doesn't care. He just shows, sir, it differently. The girl nodded slowly, but her worry lingered. Marissa realized how deeply Francesca had inherited her father's instincts, the intelligence, the awareness, the constant scanning for threats. She was a child molded by power and caution, yet Marissa's warmth had begun to carve a small space of safety and trust. A few days later, the revelation came. Marissa had been summoned to Salvatore's private study, the walls lined with dark wood and shelves of books and artifacts that, sir, spoke of history, power, and legacy. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows. He motioned for her to sit. "I have been observing you," he began, his voice calm but carrying authority that made the room feel heavier. "Not just your actions, but your instincts, your judgment, your willingness to act without fear for personal gain." Marissa's heart raced. She knew she was being evaluated. She had always suspected it, but hearing it aloud made the stakes tangible. "You see, Francesca, she is, sir, not just my daughter," Salvatore said slowly, each word deliberate. "She represents everything I have built, my legacy, my family, my empire, and anyone who steps into her world must understand the consequences, the responsibility." Marissa nodded, gripping the edge of her coat. "I understand. I never wanted to cause trouble. I just wanted her to be safe." Salvatore studied her, and for the first time, a flicker of vulnerability crossed his expression. He had always believed that control and, sir, fear were the only ways to protect those he loved. But here was Marissa, a stranger, showing that protection could also come through care, courage, and empathy. "You are different," he said quietly, almost reluctantly. Most would have walked away. Many would have run the moment they realized the danger. But you stayed. Marissa felt a warmth rise in her chest, but it was tempered by the knowledge of what this meant. "I didn't stay for recognition. I stayed because she needed someone, sir." Salvatore's gaze softened, but only slightly. "That is what makes you rare, what makes you valuable, and what makes this complicated." He paused, then leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled before him. "I cannot offer trust freely. It must be earned. But you have begun to earn it. And Francesca, she has begun to trust you." Marissa felt the weight of his words. This wasn't just approval. This was a subtle acknowledgement that she had entered a world where few outsiders could survive, sir. Yet she had begun to navigate it with courage and heart. That night, Marissa left the estate and walked slowly home. The snow had begun again, a soft blanket that muted the city's harsh edges. Her mind raced with everything Salvatore had said, every glance, every word. She realized something profound. She was no longer just a passerby in Francesca's life. She had become a part of it, and in doing so, she had also become part of Salvatore Vitale's world, a world she had once only seen from the shadows, now intimately dangerous, intricate, and alive. The revelation was simple yet terrifying. Helping Francesca had consequences. It had earned her trust, yes, but it had also marked her as someone under scrutiny. Someone whose actions could ripple into outcomes she could never fully predict. The stakes had never been higher. For Salvatore, the turning point was equally profound. He had believed for years that power and fear were the only ways to protect his daughter, but in Marissa he saw, sir, something he hadn't anticipated, a force he could not control, a kindness that was as sharp and enduring as any loyalty bought or coerced. She had challenged the rules of his world simply by being human, and now everything was poised to change. Winter had deepened, and Brooklyn wore its icy cloak like a silent sentinel. Marissa walked up the familiar path to the Vitale estate, her breath forming clouds that vanished into the cold air. She had come to understand the rhythm of this world, the quiet, measured pace, the weight of eyes that watched without warning. But tonight, something felt different. Francesca was waiting for her at the gate, her small figure illuminated by the soft glow of the estate's lanterns. She ran forward without hesitation, her scarf unraveling behind her, and threw herself into Marissa's arms. "Marissa, you're here!" Marissa hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth of life and trust radiate from the child. "I promised," she whispered. "I told you I'd be here, sir." For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the snow falling gently around them, muffling the city beyond. And then Salvatore Vitali appeared at the top of the estate's grand staircase, his presence commanding even in the quiet night. He didn't need to announce himself, the power he carried preceded him. Francesca froze for an instant, then turned to her father. "Daddy." "She saved me," she said softly, her voice edged with a mixture of pride and relief. Salvatore's eyes softened as he looked, at Marissa, then at his daughter. He had spent years building walls around his empire, around his family, around himself. He had believed that control and fear were the only ways to protect those he loved, but in this quiet moment, he realized something profound. Strength could also be found in trust, in human connection, in kindness. He descended the stairs, each step deliberate, measured. When he reached the bottom, he stopped a few feet away from them. The wind tugged at his coat, but he, seemed untouched by it, as if the chill in the air held no dominion over him. "Marissa Leone," he began, his voice low but resonant, "you have done something that few in my world would ever dare. You saw a child in need, and you acted without hesitation, without thought for your own safety. That is rare." Marissa felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from the weight of his words. She had expected caution, distance, maybe even subtle judgment. Instead, there was acknowledgement, and something, else an unspoken respect. Salvatore continued, "I cannot pretend that my world is safe for you. I cannot offer guarantees, but I can recognize courage, and I can honor loyalty." He paused, his eyes searching hers as though weighing her soul. "You have proven both, and for that, you have my trust." Marissa felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire inside the estate. It was rare to be recognized so fully, so completely, by someone whose life was defined by control and scrutiny. And yet, here it was acknowledgement, and perhaps the beginning of something more profound. Francesca tugged at Marissa's hand. "Can we play?" she asked innocently, as if the weight of their world did not exist, or perhaps because she trusted that Marissa could keep it at bay, if only for a little while. Salvatore's lips curved ever so slightly, in what could almost be called a smile. "Yes," he said quietly. "Go. Enjoy these moments while you can. They are precious." Marissa and Francesca moved to the snow-covered garden, their laughter ringing softly, fragile and defiant, a stark contrast to the harsh world that always lurked just beyond the estate's walls. Marissa felt a lightness she hadn't known in weeks. The danger had not disappeared, the world had not changed, but for now, trust and warmth prevailed. From the staircase, Salvatore watched. His mind, always calculating, always anticipating, lingered on possibilities, threats, and outcomes. But beneath the surface, there was something he, had not allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. That perhaps, through this stranger, through her kindness, he had glimpsed a path not just for Francesca, but for himself, a way to allow connection without compromise, to honor love alongside power. The night deepened, snow piling softly against the estate's stone walls, and Marissa realized that her life had irrevocably changed. She had stepped into a world that demanded vigilance, courage, and heart, and she had survived not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever. She had earned the trust of a man who could destroy empires, and in doing so, had protected a child's innocence and found a place in a family she had never imagined joining. Salvatore descended the final steps and approached them. He knelt slightly, bringing himself to Francesca's level. "Do not ever forget," he said softly, "that courage is as rare as it is precious, and kindness, it is stronger than fear." Francesca's eyes shone, reflecting the firelight and the snow, and she hugged him tightly. Marissa watched silently, moved beyond words, realizing that even the most powerful men could love, could fear, could be changed by something as simple as compassion. Salvatore stood, a figure of immense power, yet touched by a rare vulnerability. He looked at Marissa one last time that night. There were no words needed, the acknowledgement was enough. She understood fully the depth of what had passed between them, a quiet alliance forged not, in fear, but in trust, courage, and heart. As Marissa walked home through the quiet streets, the snow crunching beneath her boots, she felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. The city was dangerous. The world of the Vitale family was dangerous, But she had found something worth risking it all for: trust, connection, and the knowledge that one act of kindness could ripple farther than she had ever imagined. For Salvatore Vitale, the winter night held a rare clarity, power, and intelligence were his tools, but tonight he understood something deeper. The greatest force in the world wasn't fear, wasn't control, wasn't loyalty bought or coerced. It was trust. And in Marissa Leone, he had found someone who embodied it. Francesca leaned into Marissa as they entered the estate one last time that night, and for the first time the child felt truly safe, truly cherished. And for Marissa, that was enough. The snow continued to fall, silently covering the city, but within the walls of the estate, warmth and trust had carved out a sanctuary. A single coat, a simple act of courage, had set off a chain of events no one could have predicted, and yet, in that unpredictability, there was hope, connection, and love. Marissa paused at the gate, looking back once more at the estate, at Francesca, at Salvatore standing in the doorway, a man softened by human connection. She whispered to herself, "It was worth it." If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Cinematic Mafia, Love for more powerful stories like this. Your support keeps these stories alive.